Hey there everybody, it's markcrilley. I'm back with another How to Draw video. Today we're going to be learning how to draw BB-8, the ball droid from the new, hotly anticipated Star Wars film, The Force Awakens. Now what I've got here is a square with a line across the middle of it. People like to know the dimensions of these things. It's about 8 centimeters on all sides. That works out to just a little over 3 inches. I'm going to add just a couple of more lines to get us started. So you can see I added one more horizontal line. It's about an inch above the square. That works out to around 2.5 centimeters, and then just one line vertically right up the middle of it. So what I'm going to do now is begin to use this square to draw a circle. How paradoxical. Using a square to draw a circle, but yes, indeed, a square can help us in getting more or less a perfect circle in place. So let me begin by, I'm actually just going to do one of the curving quarters of the circle to get started. So you can see I used these 2 points on the square to guide me in creating a curving line that connects those 2 points. And pay some attention to the shape that's created here. That sort of distance between this line and that corner is about 1/3, maybe a little less than 1/3. That can give you an additional guide that helps you create that line. And so what we're going to do is continue with each one of these squares and create similar curving lines that connect the various quadrants, suitably sci-fi sounding. We shall connect the 3 quadrants and bring order to the galaxy. In any case, I'm going to go ahead and do that in time-lapse so that we can get the shape of the basic body structure of BB-8. Alright, so we've got the basic lines in place now, and I think what I'm going to do before I do anything else is get in the shape of the head, which of course is not really fixed in a certain spot. It sort of shifts around, one of the cooler aspects of the design. But I'm going to go ahead and give it just a little bit of a tilt, so watch as I put in this first guideline. Alright, so this one's a little tricky in terms of getting the proportions between the head and the body. This upper guideline that I put in there helps you to sort of understand the extent of it. The way I would look at it is think of one of these quadrants here and try to get the width of this just a little bit past that. You know, you can see if you imagined shifting this down, it would just extend a little bit past one of those quadrants. And as I said, I've given it a little bit of a tilt so that it's off center, as you can see by that line. Well, I think the next thing to do is to start to get into some of these designs. There's sort of these circular subsections that I'm not exactly sure how many. I'm going to guess there's about 5. Those of you who have the toy, I don't, can tell me you know, how many of these things there are, but I'm going to begin by getting the basic guidelines of one of these circles into place. So this one's a little bit tricky because we're seeing this circle a bit from the side. It becomes a little bit of an oval. I'm using this line up the middle of the square to sort of help me figure out the extent of this circle. And what happens is that there is a second circle that falls within it. I'll hold off on that for now. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But I'm going to draw 2 more similar oval shapes, one over here and one down here. So you can see how this one is partially concealed by the head. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and erase this line. It is no longer needed. Be gone with you. I banish you, unnecessary line. Basically, in the photo that I was studying, which incidentally I believe comes from the Comic-Con panel where they had the actual BB-8 droid on the stage, we had one of these circles in full view. We had one that was just kind of curving off around the edge, and then this one seems to be going considerably more over the edge. So there's a sort of a geometry there in terms of how many of these are visible at any given time. Well, bear with me. Like I said, I want to draw an inner circle in each one of these. We've got a couple of guidelines to do on the head, but once we're done with that, I'm going to stop with the time lapse and do some real-time drawing. Okay, so now these interior lines are going to change a little bit. The shape will change as we go along, but it helps just to sort of follow the contour of the initial guideline to begin with. Notice how narrow it gets over here, wider there as it curves across the surface. This one, a little trickier I found over here, that it gets so narrow that it really just goes off the edge, and of course this one you really don't see the far edge of that at all. I went ahead and added these seams, almost a little bit like a soccer ball, that divide these up, and you sort of imagine these heading towards the dead center of each one of those circles, and that'll kind of help you place those lines. Well, I'm going to move into drawing just a few little basic guidelines for the head, and then we're going to knock it off with all this time lapse. We're going to do some real-time drawing for you. All right, so you see I've added in a line across the top. Almost looks like he's wearing a cap of some kind. And another concentric circle here, sort of reminiscent of this area, except this is going to look quite different when we're done with it. Then this is the first of a few lines that will be here at the base, of course, following right along with that first line that we created. And here we have these two circles. Notice the larger of the two is fairly close to that cap, and then the smaller of the two, a certain distance away from it, and maybe not quite as close to the bottom. I guess a similar distance. Anyway, let's go ahead and refocus the camera. I'm going to erase some of these outside guidelines, just get them out of the way, and then we're going to do real-time drawing for drawing all of the main details of the head and body. All right, well, I was able to zoom in a little closer anyway, and now we can start to get into some of the details. And, you know, with Star Wars, it's all about the details. And part of what I always have loved about these movies is how much attention is paid to detail in the design work. So I'm adding in some lines across the head here. They are not at exactly the same intervals, I noticed, very slightly different spaces. And this is eventually all going to be colored kind of gray. It's a steely surface here, a little reminiscent of good old R2. Like, I'll stick with sort of the major design elements and then maybe get into some of the more subtle details later on. I think one of the first things we need to do is to get in this fairly complex system of dividing lines, one that curves around the, well, it sort of reads as his eye, you know, like a cyclops eye almost, doesn't it? Comes down across here, and this is what I mean by sort of complex, because over here we have another line that comes up around this second eye. Maybe it's the ear. I'm not entirely sure. But what happens is it comes across and it actually overlaps, I noticed. This line, this smaller line, slightly, ever so slightly, overlaps that first line. So if you want to be a stickler for detail, and I think a lot of Star Wars fans do, you're going to have that line overlap the upper line. In any case, it comes down here below, and I may be just a little to the right of the midway of that line. It cuts down, and we have a sort of a rectangular shape down here that comes across. And down here, it's not, these two are going to be a very sort of black, dark, bold color. Down here we have a sort of more subtle, tiny little shape. It almost just looks like a button, almost like on an iPhone or something. Maybe it is a shout-out to Apple, who knows. In any case, it's a little off to the side of that one. So this little formation of subsections here is fairly complex. And what happens for me when I'm studying the photos, this area here eventually becomes so black, so dark, that it's hard for me to even see what's in there. But there is a sort of horizontal pill-shaped structure that comes across here. And after that, boy, it's hard for me to see. There's lots of little details concealed in this area. It certainly is not like a big glass eye. It actually contains a lot of little details of its own. Over here is something that does actually look a little more like an eye, come to think of it, and it protrudes off of the head of the droid, and is I guess I would call it sort of volcano-shaped. You know what I mean? It sort of is poking up and comes. There's a circle at the top of it, like a nozzle, maybe, like a spray nozzle. Maybe it sprays window cleaner when the Jedi needed to. In any case, over across here, I'm going to draw a second line. You could hear my chair squeaking there, couldn't you? Sorry about that. My chair is starting to sound like a rusty old droid. Maybe I need to oil it. But I'm putting in a secondary line here that's mainly going to help me see where there are some orange shapes here. Square, rectangular orange shapes. There's a pattern. I'm doing a little rectangle here coming across. I think I made that guideline a little too low. For accuracy's sake, I'm going to redraw that a little higher up. Got to get these things right, or the Star Wars fans will come after me with lightsabers ablaze. And so there's I'm going to maybe erase a little as I come across here, because this is going to be orange, this little square, this rectangular area is going to be orange. There's a white subsection here. We're going to hear the word subsection a lot in this video. A very narrow one here, and then of course it's going off to the other side, and who knows what kind of a pattern is on the other side. Well, people who own the toy, they know what pattern is on the other side. I don't, so I'm going to just have to have it trail off there. Over on this side, another sort of series of rectangular shapes, maybe a tiny little one I noticed here. All of these are going to eventually be orange. And I do kind of admire the color scheme of BB-8. It reminds me of the R2-D2. You know, you have the basic white, and then you choose one other main bright color. Like for R2, it's blue, right? I think for BB-8, it's this orange. Becomes the sort of defining color. Now this is maybe also made out of metal, I'm not so sure, but it's a narrow dark gray band here at the base of the head, and what I'm going to add even after that is yet another line that is more about the underside of the head as it connects or doesn't connect. Maybe connect is not the right word, as it is magnetized to the body of the droid. Anyway, I'm sort of shading that in to sort of separate that out as a structural element. I think what I have to do to finish this off, though, is to go to the top and add these antennae that are coming off. There is a shortish white antenna. And then there's a second antenna that is maybe double the size, pretty nearby. You can see, as I said, I put this thing at a slight angle. So I'm making these antennae go up at a slight angle as well. This one narrower, I believe, and a black part at the bottom and top. How's that for details, people? Huh? And if you really want to get into the details, there are yet more concentric circles, very lightly etched into this upper section here, and they don't connect. They're sort of like two arms reaching around and not quite touching each other. Very subtle, though. You don't see these lines drawn in there so darkly. Oh, and one final one that comes across here is a very narrow rectangle. So yeah, you can see, I mean, if you decide to do this stuff all real time, I don't know, people will be like dozing off. And here's another detail, and over here is another detail. But I figure if I'm going to do it, let's do it right. Let's actually draw everything that is visible there in the design. So I'm going to go ahead and refocus the camera so as to get into some of the details on the body. Okay, now this one, it presents a lot of challenges, getting into the details of one of these circular subsections. And to get started, what I'm going to do is look at this line that is these two lines that are like the seams that go across, and use them to give me a guideline for creating, I don't know, it's not like arrow shapes, but they are these sort of tapering, slightly triangular-ish rectangles. If you don't get something in here to begin with, it's going to be real tricky when you get onto the later parts of it, because it becomes very irregular. But I did notice that there was a pattern. In fact, I probably should have put, you know, if we imagine this line continuing across, surely that seam continues over there, and that's going to help us to get these very regularly shaped dividers, basically. You know, it divides it into 4, and almost looks like little fingers, you know, holding this in place. Anyway, that's it, kind of it for the regularity. The rest of it becomes highly irregular. Highly irregular, Captain. I'm going to add in a silver, sort of like metal-colored curving rectangle shape. I guess this one's not so hard. It fills in pretty neatly that space between those two. And here there is, well, to me it almost looks like an upside-down smile. It's a crescent shape that comes right in here, very neatly fills in this space. And I guess I'm going to curve it just a little because of the surface, but I think it's more or less a straight line if you were looking at it straight on. And I got these in place to begin with because they are more regular. Down here, within this particular one that I was studying, a very irregular shape, and so I sort of held off on trying to draw this one until the end because it kind of zigzags all over the place, and you can see it coming in here. It suddenly comes to a stop, sort of like a curving stop over here, coming down, and I suppose you can have it relating to this one here. Then it all comes in and fills in the remaining gaps here. See how that just fills that all in there? And unfortunately, we're not done with the irregularities because probably dead center-ish of this circle they have carved away. Just a little negative space white shape there, and then this is all going to be silver colored except for just a little whitish rectangle right here. Now within each one of these, you know, sort of fingers that I described are little circles. They sort of look like bolts that are holding things in place. And speaking of bolts, I might go ahead and get some of these in at fairly regular placed areas. They do seem to have put in bolts that look as if, you know, they're holding these plates in place. 1, 2, 3 on each one of these subsections. So you sort of look across there and you would add another one down here. You would know that there's got to be one over here. But, you know, again, this is sort of a test of your geometry skills because you understand this is curving away and you have to keep reflecting that in your illustrations. I feel like this one's probably getting concealed, so I'm not going to draw it. But maybe over here I might go and put in an ovular indication of one of those bolts. And what do I do next? Oh, over here, again, these are very subtle lines, but there is just a little indication of design work going on over here that divides one part of what will eventually be an orange surrounding circle here. And then that in turn gets divided. You know, this video is probably really testing the patience of people who say, Mark, we like it when you do real time and you narrate every step of the process, except when you're doing BB-8 from Star Wars. That was brutal, man. Just sitting listening to you talking about here, put a line here, draw a subdivision here, and then there's this weird irregular shape over here. Not my most enthralling narration, I do apologize. But like I said, I think, you know, if you're going to do this, if you're going to try to draw a Star Wars thing, my feeling is always do it right. Get all those details in there. I noticed a little plate right here. Again, it's more or less just a line, because this isn't getting colored in. It's just sort of a gap in the surface, but it comes out here. And it comes very close to this one bolt. Now, happily, we're getting towards the end of this part of it. I'll go ahead and do, I guess, real-time-ish. This one gets divided. Again, this is going to be an orange section. They have put this line, oddly enough, coming straight across and connecting, because that doesn't really happen over here, does it? But suddenly they decided this one interrupts right there. We're going to get another one of these finger, I keep describing them as fingers because I don't know what else to describe them as, but there's one right here that comes across, and that's going to be orange. It's going to join in with this. There's another sort of little line here of a narrow rectangle. I wish I could sit in at the, you know, design meetings. Should we put a rectangular here or put it over there? You know, there must have been lots of different designs on the table before they narrowed it down to the final. It would be interesting to see if they had versions that were simpler, versions that were more detailed. I think with Star Wars, half the fun in making those movies is probably just the design work of planning all this stuff out. But anyway, there's a squarish shape here. There's a couple of little rectangular things here that I had noticed, although I think I'm getting the placement wrong here. And to be honest, this is, like I said, is the body. I was looking at a photograph from Comic-Con, and this whole area ended up getting covered by shade, you know, quite a lot. So it's hard for me to see the details. My apologies to you, BB-8 fans, if I'm getting any of this wrong, but there is some sort of circular section in here that it's worth getting a basic guideline in before shattering that guideline and creating yet another unusual, irregular shape. Almost looks like a little mouth, like the circle is opening up its mouth and eating something. Anyway, I think I'll lay off the details on that. We got one last one up here that is one of these finger-like shapes, although they look nothing like fingers, but I have decided to call them finger shapes, for lack of a better word. That should be my channel name, for lack of a better word. Crilley, the guy who always lacks. There are better words, but Crilley definitely lacks them. Another little line coming across here. Maybe I should have done the whole thing in the Brooklyn voice. That would have made it more snazzy. So the BB-8, you got these little subsections and subdivisions. Last time I was on Tatooine, at the corner of 45th. Anyway, this is yet another irregular plate shape, and I think that finally brings us to the end of the detailing on BB-8. Many thanks to those of you who stuck with me through this incredibly long-winded narration. I think that does bring us to the end of it, and I can start getting into some coloring. What I'm going to do is pull out my watercolors, and we're going to get into maybe just a little bit real-time, showing some of the color scheme, but we're definitely going to have to bring in Old Man Time-Lapse to help me finish off this video. So let's go ahead and get those watercolors and carry on to the next step. Okay, well, I've pulled out my watercolors here, and I'm going to go in and start adding orange. It's kind of a very dirty orange color that I've mixed up here. And the reason I've chosen watercolor is because it creates these sort of irregularities in the surface, which I think will only help in terms of giving it a Star Wars-y feel. You know, this droid is sort of beat up and scuffed up, and that's those of you who've seen my videos before, if you've ever heard me talk about Star Wars, then one of the things I love about it is that everything has this sort of used quality to it, and you can see the age on it, and I do believe that that's something that was sort of an innovation on George Lucas's part. Prior to Star Wars, it always seemed like the robots were shiny and brand new looking and just sort of not real, and suddenly in Star Wars, not just the robots, but the vehicles, everything just looked so real, and part of that was this feeling of age that was presented on the surfaces of things. Watercolor, I think, is a good way of representing that because, I guess it's possible to get really smooth colors with watercolor. I'm not that good at doing it. Whenever I use watercolor, I end up with a lot of irregularities. And so in a way, I can make a virtue of that drawback in using it for adding color to this illustration. You can see there's a sort of a mottled, is that the word? Mottled?
Mottled. Hey, this is a mottled looking surface here.
the Brooklyn guy living on Tatooine.
Luke, you need a new droid. No, look, the motivator is shot. I know some Jawas. Look, I'll talk to them. No, don't ask them where they get those robots. Just don't ask. Look, they're cheap, they're good, don't worry.
Anyway, that's like one of the most random things I've ever done in a video. The Brooklyn Tatooine temporary resident. So I'm just showing you basically the pattern here on all three of these circles down here. This band of orange goes all the way around the edge and extends into what I was calling the fingers, these sort of irregular shapes that I can't quite come up with the right word for. And trapezoids? Sure, trapezoids. Let's call them trapezoids. And that's basically the extent of the orange coloring that we see in this section of the robot. But what I want to do now, and I'm trying to mix up quickly a little more orange. I was having trouble getting a good orange color, I must confess, and hopefully this will work. But up here, this is what I was talking about earlier when I was laying in these shapes. This area here is where we see a lot of orange, but it's not uninterrupted, right? It's like these rectangles, each of them having the color orange. They read as a strip of interconnected or not quite connected orange squares that kind of serve as like a secondary orange stripe. I say secondary, though I have not yet drawn the first area of these two stripes. That one is going to be right up here, and as I say it, even as I say it, I realize that I forgot to draw those lines. So let's go ahead and get those in place. Well, that shows you just how complex this design is. I got all the way to this part of the illustration before realizing that I had forgotten a crucial part of the design, this orange line up here that goes right across, sort of surrounds that cap that I was talking about. And I think when you add in this color, this is when it really does start to remind me of R2-D2, with that sort of base white color, bits of metallic colors, which I'm going to be adding in later, but then in his case it was blue. In BB-8's case, it's orange. And so, yeah, that sadly probably brings me to the end of what I can do real-time in this video. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the orange. I'm going to add in sort of blacks and grays and stuff, all with watercolor. Oh, yeah, I'm going to be back with one thing that I can do real-time. I'm actually going to use a little bit of pastel before I wrap this thing up. So anyway, I'll kick it into time-lapse for now, finish up the watercolor, and I'll be right back. Alright, well, I got all of the remaining watercolor work done, and now I'm pulling out a piece of pastel, which is really just sort of artist's colored chalk. And I'm rather than apply it directly, I'm going to actually use my finger here, get a little bit of this gray chalk on my finger, and then begin to use that for adding a bit of shading to the surface of BB-8's body. Now, what makes pastel a good material for this particular illustration is that it creates a sort of a smoky, gradual effect that is very imprecise. I mean, if you're trying to draw or color in a very small, contained area, pastel is maybe not the right one to go for. But when you want a gradation of color, like a shadow like this, that changes very slowly from dark to light, or really just to the white of the page, this pastel comes in to save the day. Here I am, Captain Pastel, at your service. It really is very well suited for this kind of shading, and of course I'm not going to just use this for the body, I'm going to use it also for the head, BB-8's head, keeping in mind that the light source will be coming from the upper left, so I'm keeping all the shadows on the kind of lower right, mainly lower and to the right hand side. So I just wanted to do a little bit of that real time so as to explain my choice there and maybe give you some sense of the technique and how you apply slowly. I apply with my finger. I know a lot of people are like, no, you should be using this or that. Never let your finger, it's got oils, you're ruining the drawing. And maybe I am. Maybe I am ruining this drawing, but I'm set in my ways now. It's hard for me to change. I just like the direct contact between my finger and the illustration, to be able to alter it in such a direct way. So anyway, that gives you about as much of that as I can. I spent so much time on the real-time drawing part of it. I think I do need to sort of finish this thing all up in time-lapse. What I'm going to do is do maybe just a touch more with the pastel. Then I'm going to come in with colored pencils, tighten things up, maybe just a little hint of gouache at the end. You all know I love my beloved gouache, and I use that white opaque paint to add highlights. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot with this illustration, but just a little bit of that at the end, and then we'll be back with a few final words. Alright, well, there's my video on drawing BB-8. Sorry so much this had to be time-lapse. I put at least an hour or so into these final touches. You probably saw me do a little beloved white gouache there, a few highlights here and there, but most of this was achieved by way of colored pencil. Let me know what you thought about this video. I could certainly do more Star Wars related, how to draw videos in the months ahead if you would like me to. But for now, let me thank anyone who has supported me by getting any of my books, like Brody's Ghost and Miki Falls, my 2 graphic novel series, as well as Mastering Manga 2, and my newest book, The Realism Challenge, a book about hyper-realism. I am always super, super grateful to anyone who helps me out by getting any of those books, but let me go ahead and lay down this pencil. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I hope you found it useful, and I'll be back with another one real soon.